A government once sat down and wrote a how-to guide for murder, 19-type page,
calmly explaining the best weapons, how to stage an accident, the cleanest way to bludgeon or shoot a man so the death looks like bad luck. It was not written by a criminal. It was written by the for coup. That same agency flew a vial of poison across an ocean to be smeared on a leader's toothbrush. It mailed a poisoned handkerchief to a head of state disguised as a gift from a fan club. And in one country, American officials handed over lists of names and then watched the killing begin. These are not theories. They are declassified in the government's own word. Tonight, we open 8 more files, real operations, real victims, real money. We begin in the jungle of Guatemala with the manual itself. File 1, a study of assassination in 1954. The KIA was preparing to overthrow Guatemala's elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, in an operation codenamed PEP Success. As part of that planning, someone inside the agency produced a training document, 19 pages long, titled simply, A Study of Assassination. It did not whisper. It instructed. It weighed the merits of different weapons, discussed the right distance for a clean shot, and described how to stage a killing so it would pass as an accident or a natural death. It treated the ending of a human life as a technical problem to be solved well. For decades, it sat in a file. Then, in 1997, I released it under the Freedom of Information Act, and the National Security Archive published it for anyone to read. The coup it was written for succeeded. Arbenz fell, and Guatemala was pushed into decades of violence. A booklet meant to teach the craft of murder had become a real government document in a real operation. The next file shows what happens when the killing is not one man, but hundreds of thousands. File 2, the 1965 to 1966 Indonesian mass killings, when the Indonesian army began a campaign against suspected communists. American officials did not look away. Declassified as embassy cables, released in 2017 by the National Security Archive, show that US officials in Jakarta handed lists of names, suspected members of the Communist Party, to the Indonesian military, the State Department's own official history. The Fru's Indonesia volume documents how closely Washington tracked and encouraged the purge. What followed was one of the worst slaughters of the 20th century. By widely cited estimates, somewhere between 500,000 and over 1 million people were killed, many of them rounded up and executed on suspicion alone. In the cables, the tone is not harder.
It is approval, officials wrote of the purge as a welcome development, a problem being solved.
The bodies were real, the lists were real, and the paper trail in the government's own filing cabinets survived. The next file takes us from lists of strangers to a single man, and a poison meant just for him. File 3, the poison plot against Patrice Lumumba. In 1960, the Congo had just won independence, and its first prime minister, Patrice Lumumba, was seen in Washington as a threat. So as chief chemist, Sidney Gottlieb, the same man who ran the agency's mind control program, personally carried a vial of lethal poison to the Congo. The plan, laid out in the Church Committee interim report of 1975, was to smear the poison on something Lumumba would put in his mouth: his toothbrush, his toothpaste, his food. Gottlieb hand-delivered the toxin to a station chief, Larry Devlin, telling him to receive the contact who would announce himself only as Joe from Paris. Devlin later testified that he was deeply uneasy and that he let the poison sit, never using it. Lumumba was killed anyway in early 1961 by other hands, but the United States Senate, under oath, established the truth. A US agency had prepared poison to murder a foreign leader and flown it to his country. The next file is almost the same idea, dressed up as a friendly gift. File 4, the poisoned handkerchief, and the Health Alteration Committee. This is one of those details that sounds invented and is not. Inside there existed a body with a quiet, bureaucratic name, the Health Alteration Committee. Its purpose, according to the Church Committee interim report, was to consider operations to harm or kill targeted individual. Around 1960, with Iroquois leader al-Karim Qasim in Washington sights, this committee approved a plan. The KIA would mail Qasim a monogram handkerchief laced with poison, presented as a gift from an admiring fan club.
A personal item, an everyday object, turned into a weapon and sent through the mail.
The Senate report names the committee and describes the plot plainly. As it happened, the poisoned handkerchief never reached its mark, and Qasim was killed in a separate coup in 1963. But the record stands. A committee of officials, with a soft euphemism for a name, sat in a room and signed off on murder by parcel. The next file shows the moment the weapons left American hands and ended a tyrant's life on a dark highway. File 5, the weapons that killed Rafael Trujillo. For 3 decades, Rafael Trujillo ruled the Dominican Republic as a brutal dictator. By the early 1960s, Washington had turned against him, and a group of Dominican dissidents was plotting to kill him. According to the Church Committee report in Inspector General material, smuggled firearms to those dissidents, rifles and machine guns, moved by diplomatic pouch so they would never be searched at the border. On the night of May 30, 1961, Trujillo's car was ambushed on a highway outside the capital. He was shot dead in a hail of gunfire that left his vehicle riddled with holes. The Senate found that 3 of the supplied carbines had reached the conspirators. The agency would later argue about how directly those particular guns were used, but the core fact survived every review. American weapons, delivered in secret, were in the hands of the men who killed a head of state. The next file is bigger than one assassination. It is a president ordering an entire economy destroyed. File 6, Project FUBELT, make the economy scream. In 1970, Chileans elected a socialist president, Salvador Allende.
President Richard Nixon would not accept it. In handwritten notes taken by Director Richard Helms,
preserved by the National Security Archive, Nixon's instruction is captured in a single chilling phrase: make the economy scream. The covert effort was codenamed FUBELT, and the church committee's report on covert action in Chile lays it out. Millions of dollars committed to destabilize and unseat an elected government. Part of that effort was a plan to remove the head of the Chilean army, General René Schneider, who stood for the Constitution and against any coup. Supplied weapons to groups plotting to kidnap him. The kidnapping went wrong, and Schneider was shot and killed in October 1970. 3 years later, Allende's government fell in a violent coup, and the presidential palace, La Moneda, was bombed. The orders, the money, and the words were all written down. The next file moves to a different continent where the secret war was fought from the sky.
File 7, Operation HAIK, the secret bombing of Indonesia in the late 1950s.
Before the mass killings of the next decade, the United States was already trying to topple Indonesia's president.
Sukarno, the operation was called HAIK. Secretly armed regional rebels and supplied aircraft.
And contract pilots flew real bombing missions in support of the uprising. Washington publicly denied any involvement. Then the cover broke in the most undeniable way possible. On May 18, 1958, an American contract pilot named Alan Pope was shot down after a bombing run, a run that, by the documented record, struck near a civilian church and a market. Pope survived, was captured, and was paraded as living proof of exactly what the United States had sworn it was not doing. The denials collapsed. The State Department's own Frus Indonesia volume and declassified CI cables now document the operation in detail. A secret bombing war flown by Americans, exposed by a single downed plane and the man inside it. The next file returns to Guatemala and to a quieter, stranger kind of operation, the hunt for a justification. File 8, Operation PBHISTOry, hunting proof after the coup. The Guatemala coup of 1954 had already happened. Arbenz was gone, but it had a problem. It had justified the overthrow by claiming Guatemala was falling under communist control, and now it needed evidence to prove that claim to the world. So it launched Operation PBHISTOry. A team moved into the country and combed through tons of the deposed government's private files, letters, party records, internal documents, searching for the smoking gun that would vindicate the coup. They worked through an enormous volume of paper, and according to the own in-house history of the operation, declassified and held at a reading room and the National Security Archive, the search did not deliver. The agency quietly acknowledged that it never found the clear proof of Soviet control it had gone looking for. The justification had come first. The evidence was hunted afterward, and it was not there. This is where the 8 files close. What ties these 8 files together is not a single villain. It is a pattern. A government that again and again decided the rules did not apply abroad, that elected leaders could be poisoned, that economies could be made to scream, that the proof could be invented after the fact. None of this is rumored tonight. Every operation here lives in declassified files, Senate testimony, and the government's own official histories. Papers were meant to stay buried. They did not. The unknown files exist to keep reading them calmly, in full, no matter how uncomfortable the page.
There are always more files. We will open the next one soon.